All right. Well, good morning, everyone. Happy Friday. Thanks for joining another coffee break series. We're going to continue on this discussion we had talked about or started the last time, really getting focused more on strategy and planning and thinking a little bit beyond, the solutions and supports and some of the products. We spent a lot of time in November talking about teams, really well attended, and obviously a very important topic. We'll probably be coming back to that in early 2021, just based on the interest level. But we're going to talk today about assessing your IT operational maturity level. A lot of words, but I think it's an important topic really as we talk about how to evaluate where you are positioned as an organization in terms of your IT strategy. And if you are working with a partner, how to look at the important things to focus on to improve that. So excited to be joined today by David Eichkorn. Good morning, David.
Good morning. It would help if I unmute.
Yeah. Step one in your operational maturity is learn how to use the mute button. So David, if you could introduce yourself and tell everyone a little bit about your background.
Yeah, sure. Good morning. I'm David, and I have been with Levity and the Gordon Flesch Company coming up on 18 years. I've held a few roles throughout that time, and in my career, which the bulk of it has been with Gordon Flesch, I have been responsible for IT operations initially at Gordon Flesch, so keeping the technology lights on, so to speak, and leading a staff of folks who provided talent and services to help users and run networking systems and everything in between. But after that role, I joined our managed IT services program and helped start the VCIO program. And really what that VCIO program is to represent and provide strategic resources to clients who don't have IT resources or don't have strategic IT resources on staff, help them build solutions, and more importantly, help them build a roadmap for the process of aligning technology with their business goals and ensuring that we're utilizing technology to drive growth and results within our clients' organizations.
Great. Well, thanks for joining. We're gonna kind of dive into a bit of a Q&A here on the operational maturity level, and kind of a bit of a newer tool for us that we have I think really jumped onto and feel like it's going to be a great tool for us to help our clients. But for those of you that are attending, as always, we'd love for this to be a session where you can get your questions answered, as well as me making David answer all of mine. Utilize the Zoom function. There's a Q&A little icon in that box that allows you to mute and unmute typically. We have that turned off now, but you can click on that Q&A box and enter in your question. That'll inform me or notify me. I'll take a look at the question and try to get that answered at some point during the next 20 minutes as we chat. So David, operational maturity. I jokingly shared with you as we prepped that maturity and my name are two words or two phrases that haven't been joined together very often in my career or in my life. Not been accused of being overly mature historically. And it's usually not a word I think that most people would apply to evaluating their IT position. Tell me a little bit more about that.
Sure. I think my 8-year-old would agree with that as far as I'm concerned. So I think we're all in similar boats, right? No, maturity from an IT perspective is the understanding of service delivery costs, all the things that go in that, and making sure that we have the right tools and resources to drive the most efficient outcome we can from the IT organization and deliver the most value that it can to everything that the organization is trying to accomplish.
Yeah. So how do we start to evaluate a level associated with maturity?
So I think there's a couple different ways that an organization would get started thinking about maturity. First is, you kind of have to recognize that the need is there. Organizations that utilize technology to just kind of take care of basic processes and they're content with that, they may not see the value that you go through in doing an OML assessment, because an OML assessment is not a 5-10 minute conversation. An OML assessment takes resources from multiple levels within the organization. It can take a significant amount of total time to perform the assessment, identify priorities, and put a plan together to initiate the changes and the improvements that we see that would come out of the assessment. So first I think is just the need um, to see the value and the benefit of learning this information. Um, Second would be to look to see how we're going to go about this. And I think most organizations would recognize the value of a third party coming in to help give fresh perspective, a different pair of eyes toward the organization, what they're doing, and how the IT operations and the IT organization is performing. So bringing in a strategic firm who specializes in the ability to represent an operational maturity level process, going about the analysis, and then helping organizations put together a plan that can prioritize the actions that are found through the assessment and how that's going to affect the organization. So long story short, recognize the need, solicit participation, and engage a firm that has specialization and expertise in this process.
Yeah, so I mean we think that this is an important thing. That explanation, I think it clearly articulates that it's an important thing to do, and it does take some time, but it doesn't take an enormous amount of time either. Can you put into perspective a little bit about what the steps would be? Because I don't want anybody to tune out thinking this is like a security assessment from a top 5 CPA firm that's going to take weeks and cost tens of thousands of dollars. Give me a little perspective on the time that it would take and the effort involved to do that.
Good question. So I think that initially there's phases to this, right? The initial time to go through and talk about the varying traits of an operational maturity process. I mean, I would say that's the course of a couple of hours, maybe a light afternoon where we've got a round table of senior leadership and ownership, along with any other business leaders in the organization that can participate from sales or operations, finance, HR, whatever leaders are there, because this affects all of them, because technology affects all of them. So gathering that round table and having a discussion over a course of a few hours on an afternoon allows for all of the knowledge to be gained from someone like me who's running the OML assessment, and they can really dive into some of the areas. And really, I think one of the things I like doing in that process, quick side note, is watching the room kind of learn things about each other that they didn't know. So not only is it a discussion about technology in the IT organization, but I have found that the business units come together and they give feedback afterwards that says, wow, we learned more about each other and our organization through this process than we've ever done before in any other strategy meetings that we've had. So back to your question, I'm sorry, I digress. I would say that, getting started is that initial process. Then you've got the time to go through and review, which is really my time now, to review and assess and put together a report and a findings document. And then I think back to the client, the additional time invested is now to review that and look at how that could impact the business, set some priorities, and now work to put a plan in place. And that plan is a collaborative effort. So, you're right. This isn't a process that takes months or even years, but it is a process that requires investment of time from multiple individuals, and really the commitment to not only see the process through, but also act on the outcome. So I'd say start to finish, if someone was looking to see what does a time frame look like on this, I would say potentially a month's time frame to go through the steps and to have an initial outcome. That doesn't mean we're working on it for 30 days, but I think the total course of 2 to 3 weeks to get through all the steps and really come out with an action plan that's meaningful and valuable.
Yeah, and that's obviously collective time, client or leadership time, maybe 4 to 6 hours of total time investment.
I would say that's about right. Yep.
Yeah. So some of the things you were just mentioning, we had Nick Bamboulis on last week to talk about a technology roadmap. Some of the things that you talked about are the similar things that Nick was sharing, and some similar expectations. How does a operational maturity level assessment and a technology roadmap tie together and work well together? And how are we using those to help organizations see a little bit beyond this week and next month?
Clients that I work with are usually pretty focused and motivated on wanting to be strategic. They value the efforts to incorporate technology to their business plan and write a technology roadmap, which I sometimes candidly call the technology chapter of your business plan. We can't put, I think, the degree of effort into that strategic plan, that roadmap, as much as we could if we had the OML assessment to help us identify where the weak points are in the technology organization. And weak points aren't necessarily bad. It could look at processes associated with cybersecurity event response. It could be how we're managing compliance within a regulatory rule set. I think that the strategic element and the outcome of that roadmap is substantially greater when we have an OML assessment in front of us, helping guide us to the efficiencies in the areas of the technology organization that need to improve based on the departmental dependencies of technology. So I would, again, I'd summarize that by saying that the roadmap, when initially, is based on the outcome of the OML assessment and driving some activities that help us improve the OML level based on the goals and the priorities we identify. The roadmap will initially contain those initiatives. But as we work through those initiatives, the roadmap becomes more and more strategic initiative to driving the technology initiatives that are going to help further the organization. So I think in short, it strengthens the roadmap and helps it to be more robust than what it could be without the OML knowledge.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to describe it. The technology roadmap is usually more focused on, I mean, it's the OML is a component of it, but a big portion of the technology roadmap, at least what we talked about last time, a couple weeks ago, was that it's focused on the decisions that need to be made, the goals that are more in the future, the direction that the organization wants to head, and us making sure that we are aligning decisions along the way to point, in that direction. Our analogy is, if you're going to get in the car and drive to California, you don't just get in the car and start driving. You kind of pick some roads, you pick some direction, you make a couple hotel reservations, maybe a few sites that you want to see along the way. You can deviate it once you've started, but you have to have some level of plan before you get in the car and start driving. The OML kind of looks like is almost like taking your car to the shop to make sure that it's ready to make the drive. And if you need to buy some new tires, you got to plan for that. Is that a fair analogy? We all know I'm a king of analogies. Sometimes they work, sometimes they don't.
I think that makes sense. Not only are you thinking about the tires, but maybe you're taking it to the degree of fuel efficiency. The OML looks at 5 different traits, from beginning to scaling to innovating. And someone who wants to have an innovative experience with their car and look at fuel efficiency and leverage emerging technologies like, electric vehicles or whatever, you could probably take that analogy 10 different ways, but depending on where you want your organization or your automobile experience to be on the way to California, there's a different level of OML that will point us to where we want to be. And then back to the roadmap, I think that based on where we want to be in that process, that will govern some initiatives that we need to put into our technology plan to accomplish. And sometimes those things have to be done before we can get on the road. Sometimes those are things that we can work on during the trip.
Good. So you mentioned 5 different sections or categories of the OML that get assessed. What are those, and what do they focus on?
We start with beginning, right? This is an organization that traditionally has had no structured focus to IT. There really isn't an awareness of what service delivery looks like with IT to the employees and to the rest of the organization. Budget's really unknown. It's a real reactive approach to IT. We just kind of handle it as it happens and don't have any structure or oversight toward what it takes to manage that. Emerging is the next trait. And that's kind of, now we get the fact that we don't know what we don't know, but we know that there's something we need to do better or differently. So it's awareness, and it's opening the door to saying, we got to figure this out. And I would think that step is kind of the phone call for, hey, we need to go through this assessment. because we want to know what we can do differently. It'll bring awareness potentially to exactly what those unpredictable budget numbers are, and help guide an understanding of where we need to set some priorities. The third trait is scaling. We've gone through the OML exercise. We have a basic understanding of what our IT organization's costs are. We still have some excessive flexibility within the organization. And what I mean by flexibility is not what you think of in terms of technology and how it can dynamically perform things like, joining a Zoom meeting or joining a Teams meeting, to working in Excel and multitasking within a computing environment like that. But it's more about the flexibility that is available that can create situations to go awry with technology. So that flexibility in my mind is having computers where users have complete control over them, which traditionally, has not maybe been as big of a concern as it is today with the cybersecurity threat landscape that we manage. So when you think about flexibility, flexibility is really looking at the computing environment as an office resource, as a company tool, and ensuring that it's focused on the outcome that we want it to have for the productivity of our employees. So that's what I mean by flexibility. So we may have reduced some of that flexibility and put better controls in place to manage threats and cybersecurity and things like that. We probably have a better handle on budget predictability, but maybe not have a complete, consistent, fixed approach to our IT expenses. And I think that senior leadership at this point is fully engaged, or ownership is fully engaged in understanding the value that IT has, and why we're going through this OML assessment, and why it's important that we continue to prioritize the activities that OML is guiding us through. The fourth trait is optimizing. So now we've really gotten into this. We've got a plan to execute on initiatives that are going to help us raise the operational efficiency of the IT organization. We've put standards in place for process and consistency throughout the IT systems. We have a solid understanding of what the total cost is associated with the IT organization, from manpower to leadership to hardware to software and service and everything that goes into running that division. Excuse me. We've also looked at budget efficiency, and we've put high priority toward ensuring that our costs are fixed as much as possible, and we've done everything we can to reduce the dynamic nature of unpredictability. The fifth trait is innovating. So at this point, we have done we've performed significant effort toward ensuring that processes are in place. We have standard operating procedures against all of the things that our IT organization does. And side note, when I say IT organization, I could be referring to internal staff. I could also be referring to the managed services provider that you've delegated IT management to, or IT operations, or all of the above, and letting that professional firm handle the work. So both of those make up the IT organization when I refer to that. But in this case, we've got the standard operating procedures associated with how technology is governed, how it's managed, how it's acquired, everything in between. And we have full alignment with technology at the strategic level of the organization, where technology is either fully integrated with the rest of senior leadership, and in some cases, it may even be driving some of the initiatives and the growth of the organization. So that covers the 5 traits.
Interesting. Yeah, and it really does. Once it's all answered, and once we all work through, the different questions, it does kind of paint a picture about where an organization stands, and what things need to be tweaked and adjusted to move forward. Compare that to lining things up with a long-term direction and some goals, and it really, I like how you said that. I've heard you say it before, that it's the technology chapter of a business plan, and if you want to go somewhere, you've got to have a plan, and it needs to have different chapters, and this is a really important part of that. Indeed. Do want to remind everyone to, if you have questions, feel free to drop those into the Q&A box. We haven't had any so far, which I'll take as meaning that so far we've been super thorough. It also might mean that this is a really new concept and difficult for everybody to get their head around, which is all okay. We do intend to be approaching each one of our current clients that haven't taken the time to go through an OML exercise and begin that process. So stay tuned. More to come if you're a current client, we'll be addressing that. If you aren't, we'd love to have a conversation to figure out how we can incorporate that into what you're doing. David, anything more to add, maybe an experience or conversations that you've had as it relates to an OML or a technology roadmap that would be valuable for people to hear?
Yeah, I think that the two, we talked about this before, the two really go hand in hand. Now I've had plenty of success helping organizations build a technology roadmap without the OML exercise. But the ones that we have gone through the OML exercise with, I think that they, after the fact, see the areas of IT that traditionally are kind of behind the curtain and people don't realize, and there's similar traits to what other subdivisions in an organization does. Like if you look at HR, or if you look at accounting, successful departments like that are very process driven, and there's metrics and there's measurement associated with how those departments are supporting and helping the organization to grow. And technology has not always been looked at that way. And I think when organizations look at the IT division of an organization similar to the other departments, and they see the value that comes out of it and the metrics we can put to it, that measure how it's supporting the organization, it's a light bulb, and they're super appreciative of the fact that we've been able to identify the opportunities there, and I think folks really appreciate uh, how IT now becomes one of those critical business departments, and not the cost center that sits in a room off the side of the warehouse that has a server in it that makes a lot of noise, because IT just isn't that way anymore, and it shouldn't be that way if we leverage it the right way.
Yeah, and unfortunately, I think the last 9 months has made that all too very clear for many organizations. Those that did treat it as just that thing that they had to have kind of able to function, and had to pivot quickly to either have people work remotely or to change processes to get work done differently, struggled. We saw that and helped some organizations through it. But those that did have a plan and had a lot of things in place and had thought about it correctly, were able to pivot, and in some cases without missing a beat. And we hope that, yeah, when we talk about our technology roadmap, we hope that around the corner on our roadmap is a period of time where we can get back to normal and talk about how crazy that period was when we had to pivot. We can focus on going after a new chapter. David, thank you for your time on this. OML is an exciting thing for us to be bringing to our clients. It's kind of the next level, I think, in strategic planning and thinking about the future that we really want to be bringing to our clients, and not just focusing on solutions and support, but incorporating and focusing on strategy that includes a really strong security position. And I think OML helps us to get there. So thanks again. Great to have the chat with you. Well done. And thanks everyone for participating. Keep an eye out for our continuing coffee break series that we'll have in 2021. A little pitch for a thought leadership webinar that is scheduled for next week. Our very own Paul Hager, Director of Solutions and former owner of ITP, will be presenting his annual technology future, things to come in 2021. Exciting, interesting, sometimes scary, possibly creepy technology that is around the corner that may become more everyday applications that we all may be using. So keep an eye out for that, and please register. It's always interesting, entertaining, and informational. Thanks again, everyone. Have a great weekend, and we'll talk to you soon.
Thanks, Jeff. Take care, everybody.